From my own point of view, the ongoing global dynamics and climate change is actually very important to the stakeholders in Indonesia. For one, Indonesia is very important in terms of its greenhouse gas emission and in terms of the effects from climate change that it's experiencing. Geographically, it is vulnerable to extreme events, as can be seen in severe flooding and even to other disasters such as earthquakes and tsunami-like events. And what we are seeing now is that the world has come together on a consensus for working towards limiting the temperature increase to 2 degrees and at best, or if possible, to 1.5. And these kinds of discussion at the global level is also happening in Indonesia, which is also very much concerned with the fact of the problems that we are being beset by climate change. Indonesia would need, as it has already done, to ratify its submission called the INDC, and Indonesia would need to really make sure that its constituents are able to support its implementation and see to the attainment of the targets that it has set for the critical sectors such as energy, land use and land use change and forestry and others.
During Paris Agreement in last year, countries submitted their intended national determined contributions to the UNFCCC. So it requires the national government to set up their national implementation actions for the mitigation of climate change, including Indonesia. So Indonesia also submitted INDC, which targeted 26% from the BAU scenarios in 2020 and 29% reductions of its GHG emissions by 2030. So the country also has been implemented or is about to implement a lot of policies to help to achieve these INDC targets. But when we considered about policy and its implications, people are worried about how much its impact on the economy and how much its impact on our jobs. So ILO initiated a project on the labor market implications of the Indonesian INDC, and we were engaged in providing through the modeling exercises the quantitative assessment of such kind of implications. And from the results of our studies, still it's preliminary, but it's indicated that the overall kind of employment impacts will be neutral, but that is not to indicate there will be no impact, but the impact will be happens on some fossil fuel based sector as well as those electricity generation from the fossil fuels as well as the energy intensive sector, but the job will shift from those sectors to other sectors, in particularly the renewable energy-based electricity generation, as well as the low-carbon technology or energy-efficient technologies. So our results indicate this kind of shift from some sectors to another sectors will happen, but the overall kind of employment impact will be near zero.
I think Indonesia, like many countries in Asia and the Pacific, is faced with a dual challenge of not only the climate change and environmental degradation, but also the employment situation. While it is experiencing a relatively good growth and there is still the unemployment problem, both in terms of the general unemployment as well as the youth unemployment. So Indonesia would need to have an integrated approach towards this and find the opportunities within the transition to the green economy to create decent jobs for all of its constituency, including the youth and the vulnerable communities. The greatest challenge is for it to be able to convene all the stakeholders, all the relevant players, to institute measures which are practicable and which will enable it to reach its target. At the same time, ensure that the jobs that are created in the transition would be decent. Elaborating further on the need for an integrated approach that would address both the environment and climate change concerns as well as the employment issue. Another challenge for Indonesia is to make sure that the policies are coherent and that the national policies will be translated into practicable measures at national, subnational, and local level, and that they are able to do this through a tripartite approach involving all stakeholders and allowing for effective social dialogue. The ILO has the ILO Green Jobs Program, which is the focal unit that deals with the issue of climate change and environment and works to integrate these into the Decent Work Country agenda or country programs of its member states. And the Green Jobs Program is very much involved in the discussions at the UNFCCC and has been very active, in fact, in COP21, where we saw the Paris Agreement come into being. And following up on the COP21, the ILO is very active in organizing the upcoming side events to COP22 that tackles the issue of creation of decent jobs in the context of Sustainable Development Goal number 8, as well as coming up of social protection measures to ensure climate resiliency and to help climate vulnerable communities. Now, the ILO Green Jobs Program works to enable the tripartite constituents to become effective players in the policy debate that is necessary to shape the nature of the future of work in the context of the transition to the green economy. Research are being conducted to form the body of evidence that can be used in this debate. And the ILO has passed what is called the policy guidelines for just transition towards environmentally sustainable economies and societies. And these guidelines provide the practical tool to nationalize the global framework being provided by both SDGs as well as the Paris Agreement in 2015 to enable the constituents to participate and play an active role in the implementation at the national and local levels. The global uncertainty, is it relating to the climate change effects? Okay. I can only speak from the point of view of what we in the ILO has been conducting and undertaking or discussing with our tripartite constituents. And right now we are hoping that the various studies that we have conducted will provide our tripartite constituents and other relevant bodies the necessary tools to make sure that the employment implications of all of the climate change policies and the coming into force of the Paris Agreement will be addressed at the national level. Also, as I mentioned previously, there is the side events that the ILO are organizing with other UN agencies in COP22 that are aimed at supporting the creation of decent work in the context of just transition and in the attainment of SDG number 8, as well as discussing and exploring potential social protection measures to enhance resilience of climate vulnerable communities.